So hey everybody, thanks for joining us for the summer hydration webinar. Mason here with Vishal. He's taken a little bit of time from mixing up the new flavors of Nuun and all those fun things to give us a rundown on how to stay hydrated in the heat, how to train in the heat, and how to reach our personal best in the summer months. So from here, we will do a quick run through the slides, and then we've got some questions that we received that we'll address and get those answered up. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes, and thanks for joining. I'll kick it off to Vishal.
All right, hey guys, hope you're enjoying your summer thus far. Yeah, like Mason said, we're just gonna go through it and talk about ways that you can kind of beat the summer heat and use hydration for your benefit. So some of the things that we're going to cover today is really the effects of exercising in hot water and what that does to your body. Then we're going to go into the benefits of proper hydration. We'll talk again about conducting your sweat test. For those of you who have tuned into webinars in the past, you know I'm a big proponent of those. And then we're going to talk about some hot weather training and hydration tips and tricks to wrap it up. And then, as Mason mentioned, we kind of preceded some questions, and we'll be going over those at the end as well. So, now that we're pretty much in the heat of the summer, it's important to kind of understand what's happening to your body at that point. So, as temperature rises, your external temperature on your skin rises as well, which essentially makes your core temperature rise. So your body is heating up. And with that, when your body heats up, you're adding more stress to it. So the longer you're exercising, the hotter it is, the more stress that you're putting onto your body. And then what that essentially means that it can decrease your energy and then decrease your muscle function as well, which can all kind of degrade your performance. So it's really important to kind of really understand how the hot weather is affecting your body, and then really look at ways that you can cool your body down through hydration and through some nutrition and things like that we're going to cover in the next slide. And then, while your body is heating up as well, it's got to find a way to release that heat. And that's normally done through sweating. It's the most effective way for our body to cool down. But as some of you may know, as you're sweating, you're losing key nutrients like sodium, potassium, and chloride in there to a smaller degree in your sweat that you need to replenish, as well as you're losing some fluids as well within your sweat. So what hydration, really does for your muscles is a really important thing I want to cover, because a lot of times, whether it's runners or cyclists or any sort of athletes, they're always looking for energy. And, the way that we get energy is, through carbohydrates and through, caffeine or some other stimulant. And for endurance exercise, yes, you do need energy and you do need fuel to help you, excel at those prolonged distances. But what you really kind of have to take a step back and think about is, what does hydration actually do for me? And, it's been pretty much well known that a goal of hydration is to replenish what you would lose via your sweat, like we mentioned earlier, and that's absolutely true. So, the goal is to try to hydrate to replenish the fluids and the electrolytes you are losing. But what we found, recently in the last 15 to 20 years through research is that, the electrolytes actually play more of a key role in helping fluid absorption. So it's important that when you are hydrating, you want to think about the electrolytes that are in your solution are not only to replenish what you're losing in your sweat, but they're also helping with absorption. And when you absorb more fluid, you're fundamentally giving your body, giving your muscles more oxygen. So that is what proper hydration actually does. Is the goal of it really is that when it's done properly, it will deliver oxygen to your muscles, which will allow them to breathe and function properly. It doesn't matter if it's hot out or not. You want your muscles to function properly, and just knowing what hydration does inside of your body when it's done right can kind of change that mindset on what your body really needs for energy as opposed to fuel. So, there's a lot of additional benefits of hydration. When you're properly hydrated, you have a more, peace of mind, which will kind of help reduce your perceived effort when you're exercising. The goal of hydration should be to decrease GI distress, because GI distress shouldn't occur while you're hydrating. If your fluids have the right concentration of electrolytes and carbohydrates, the fluids won't sit for a very long time in your stomach where it can cause stomach issues. They'll just go straight into your bloodstream and start being used up by your body. And, another key component of hydration is, regulating your body temperature. And that's done through sweat, and that's done just through proper hydration. And because when hydration is done correctly and it's not sitting in your stomach and it can be eaten up and used up by your muscles, it'll help keep your body cool. And, one of the main complaints that we hear from many, many athletes is that they overheat sometimes in the summer when it's really hot. And then one of the first things I ask them is, what was your hydration like during? And, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I just drank nothing but water. And, water during exercise won't just cut it, because the water is even going to sit in your stomach for a while. And as that water sits in your stomach and your body has to dilute it, you're putting more stress on your stomach. So you essentially have to, wait for that lag time for whatever fluids that you're consuming to properly absorb into your bloodstream, which then will, can regulate your core temperature. And, within Nuun, we have various products within our electrolytes and electrolytes of caffeine that are designed to have the right amount of carbohydrates and electrolytes to help you absorb the fluids you're consuming for, your lighter exercise activities. And then we have performance that has more electrolytes and a little bit more carbohydrates, because it takes a little bit more of those nutrients to deliver the fluids properly during more prolonged endurance exercises, really anything over an hour to hour and a half as well. So some of the training tips that you can, that you should consider taking in, not even just for the summer, but really when the seasons are changing, is to acclimate your body. So it's similar like when you're running and you're just kind of training and you want to train your body to run at a specific pace. You want to acclimate your body towards the environmental conditions. So to do that, it's as easy as just kind of slowing it down, and slowing down your perceived effort by about 15 to 20% can really do the trick. And just slowing that down for a couple weeks will actually set you up for success and continuing on training throughout the summer, rather than having workouts where it's taking you longer to recover because you weren't properly hydrated going in, or your body wasn't ready to kind of get back into that effort with some of the drastic changes within the environment. And, another really simple thing to do is you can eat hydrating foods. I mean, your total fluid intake throughout the day doesn't have to come from just water, Nuun, or coffee or anything like that. It can come from foods that have the higher content of water. And, luckily for us, foods that have higher contents of water are also really good for you, like fruits and vegetables. So it's kind of, try to stick to those in the summers, and try even eating some like watermelon or something before a run, just to kind of give you a little bit of carbohydrates and water before your effort that day. So another component that we've talked about a lot through our webinars is conducting a sweat test. And each athlete, they really should know how much they sweat. because it's going to change season to season. It's going to change based on how your fitness is gaining throughout the year as well. And one really important thing to note is that when you're conducting your sweat test and you get the value, we have the kind of the easy 1, 2, 3 steps laid out right there, which is essentially just weighing yourself before and after the run, and then not consuming any fluids. But a lot of times, athletes think that, oh, I lost, 32 ounces of fluid an hour, I have to drink 32 ounces of fluid an hour. That's absolutely not true. You lose a lot of stuff in sweat. You lose fluids, you lose electrolytes. You also lose glycogen, which is your stored form of carbohydrates. So we always say to try to replace up to half of what you're losing in your sweat, and then you can kind of have a plus or minus 4 ounces on there. Use that value, and then go off for a run and test it out. If you're feeling a little bit thirsty at the end of the run, maybe add a little bit more fluid. If you're kind of feeling like you a little bit full during the run, then you know that you can back out a little bit, back off on the fluid a little bit. And again, like I always encourage all the athletes to conduct sweat tests at the beginning and towards the end of every season, just to know how their body is adapting to the environmental conditions and how most efficiently you can use the fluids that you are consuming. So a couple other tips and tricks for just kind of staying cool is to drink a Nuun slushy about a half hour before you exercise. It's pretty easy to make a slushy. Just blend up some ice, and you can add like a Nuun concentrate, just dissolving 1 tab into like 4 or 5 ounces of water, and then kind of just downing that. If you're carrying a handheld, freeze it, and then because when you start the run, the cold kind of ice of the handheld is going to keep you cool, and then it's going to melt a lot faster too. So then once the ice kind of melts, you'll have your fluids. So it's always kind of a good idea to freeze your handheld, and be smart about it too. When you take the handheld out of the freezer like a half hour before the run, trying to get a massive block of ice to melt is not really realistic, but oftentimes we drive to a trailhead or a track or something like that where, you're still giving it a little bit more time. One of the big mistakes I always see during, races, whether I'm watching like a triathlon or a marathon on TV, is a lot of times the athletes will pour, ice cold water or just ice on their head. And that you don't want to do that. That's going to shock your system, and it's going to drop your core temperature so much that your body's going to have to work extra hard to try to regulate it. Some of the key areas that you do want to apply ice or just water is on your wrist, your armpits, kind of on your back, and then around your core as well, kind of like within your sternum area. So just try to do that. Use those quick spots. The best way to do it is just try to keep yourself cool. Wrap a bandana around with some ice cubes, and then just do everything you can to try to keep your external skin cool, so then your internal core temperature can get regulated by proper hydration. So some other tips and tricks for summer training is to, stay hydrated throughout the day. We always say that, drink fluids throughout the day. Water won't just cut it all the time. That's why we have products like Nuun vitamins that have slightly lower amount of electrolytes but taste great, so you want to drink fluids throughout the day. Note that your fluid intake should increase when your exercise intensity increases as well. And pay attention to electrolytes as well. They're going to play a key matter in replenishing what you're losing in sweat and helping you at rest by absorbing the fluids. You need electrolytes in your fluids. And then create a hydration schedule and hold yourself to it. I mean, it can be something as simple as, having a reusable water bottle on your desk and setting a timer to make sure that, you're drinking a set amount every hour or every hour and a half. Just so you can give yourself those easy reminders and tricks that, although I'm inside in an air-conditioned room, I know I should still, keep my body cool, keep my body hydrated. So whenever I'm going out to exercise, I'll set myself up for success there.
Sweet. So we just made it to the question section, and we've broken these down into a couple of subsections. So the first 3 questions from Amanda, Tony, and Ariel all have to do with the topic of salty sweaters and salt crystals. So can you give us a breakdown on kind of like what we see when we're seeing the salt crystals? Is that good? Is that bad?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question, and I actually smiled when I read those 3 because it's something that I wanted to cover, but I'm glad it was asked in one of the questions. So that's something that we, I see, and then you'll see at any race, like people just have salt crusted all over themselves, and unfortunately I think for some of you, you might not want to hear this, but what Ariel mentioned is that there really is there is no such thing as a salty sweater. And if you're noticing that you're having salt crusted on your skin or on your, cycling jersey, running singlet after your run or ride or whatever, then your dietary intake of sodium chloride is too high. So the salt is that sodium chloride, a lot of westernized food intakes and things like that, dietary habits have a lot of sodium in there, and it's and that's kind of like what's happening there is that your intake of sodium through food and other things is too high. That doesn't mean that the electrolytes that you're consuming during fluid are too much or too little. It's that your dietary intake, your stored sodium that you have in your body is too high. And, there's a couple things that you can do, or really just, there's a couple things you can do to try to combat this because it's really hard. I mean, for athletes, they're either not eating or drinking enough sodium, or they're drinking too much or eating too much. There's really no in between, and there's dangers in both of them. And we've seen kind of the dangers in eating too much sodium, and then it can kind of get crusted on your skin, and then kind of deregulate some of your electrolyte imbalances, and then too little, and then you're not giving your body the electrolytes it kind of needs. So, what I would encourage you to do is to download, like a food log app like MyFitnessPal or something like that, and record your, food intake for 3 days. Do not change anything at all. Go through your normal eating habits. Try not to think that, try not to eat any more or less salt than you normally would. Just go ahead and log everything, and then look at those micronutrient values. Look at how much sodium you are consuming. I guarantee you it's going to blow your mind how high it is, even if you do try to eat as healthy as you can. And then really, from there, I would start reducing that amount by about 10%. Reduce that sodium intake by 10%, go out for a couple runs, exercises, see how your body feels, and then adjust from there. I wish I could tell you exactly how many milligrams of sodium you should and shouldn't consume during a day, but it's so hard to determine that without going through some vigorous physiological testing. What I do know is that when you are losing excessive amounts of sodium during exercise, during exercise, it always, not always, oftentimes it will point to your dietary intake of sodium is a little bit too high. So, just be aware of that and try to look at your nutritional intakes to try to fix that. And then, and again, I want to just make it clear that it's not the electrolytes that are in your fluids. So because you do want to make sure that you are consuming, Nuun and things like that throughout the day, because in the majority of our products, it isn't sodium chloride. It's actually sodium citrate. So there's no salt in there. It's a sodium citrate that's being used. In Nuun vitamins, there is a tiny amount of chloride just to help with some of that absorption, but really kind of just look at your nutrition and then try to decrease your overall intake from there.
Sweet, sounds good. So the next two questions are a little bit more environmental-based, training in the heat. My question actually is if I end up regularly training in the heat and acclimating, but then my race ends up being in the cold, what happens? And Jeremy's question is, at what point are conditions too hot to train? Can it be too hot?
Yeah, so I'll start with Jeremy's question. So, can it be too hot? Yeah, it can. That normally doesn't stop, athletes from going out and training. That will stop races from conducting events. Honestly, like I was just, in Las Vegas for a couple days, and it was 107 degrees there, and I couldn't remember ever being in weather that warm, and just walking around, I was drenched in sweat, and I wouldn't even consider exercising in that. For me, that would just be too much. Anything really above, honestly, like 100 degrees, you really have to make sure you're keeping your body cool. You have to play it safe. Be smart about it. I know you'll be acclimated and your body is used to it, but don't do like a really, really hard workout, or go for a max like tempo run or something like that when it's above 100 degrees. It can get a little bit too hot. At that point, you're overheating your body, and you're overworking it too much, and there's only certain things you can do to keep your body cool. But I would still recommend using some of those external mechanisms to keep your body cool. Ice on your wrist, armpits, core on your backside, to try to just keep your skin cool as much as you can. Proper hydration will do that as well, because it's not going to add any more stress onto your stomach, which will then raise up your core temperature. And then, on to Mason's question, so if you end up regularly training in the heat, but your race is in the cold, that's a tricky situation. A lot of times it's the opposite, and you can actually not easily, but you can get ready for the opposite by doing some strategies at home. But, if you're when you're racing and when you're training in the heat, I'm not as concerned as training in the heat and then racing in the cold, unless it's like frigid conditions. Because, there's been a lot of interesting research that's been coming out that says like training in high heat and humidity, not like 100 plus degrees, but like, in the high 80s, low 90s sometimes, is actually as beneficial as altitude training, because when you're controlling some of those external nutrition and hydration strategies, you're essentially feeding your body more oxygen, and it's working harder. So you're training harder. You're giving the same perceived effort essentially, but your body is training itself harder. So going from like a warmer training environment to a slightly colder one, I wouldn't be as worried. But there are certain things, like I still would try to get to the race environment a couple days early to just acclimate your body and allow your body to adjust to that. And then you probably want to dial back your fluid intake a little bit. I wouldn't be too drastic about that. Just kind of maybe dial it back like 5%, 4 or 5 ounces or something like that, just to kind of, because your body will theoretically won't need that much fluid with that change.
Sweet. And we have one more page of questions.
Oh, sorry.
There it is. So we have 4 questions from Carol, George, Nicole, and Nadia. Is that right? Yeah. And Holly. 5 questions. And they have to do with salt tablets and sodium per hour recommendations. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'll just start with the salt tablets. I don't recommend consuming salt tablets ever, let alone during endurance exercise. Sodium chloride is not what you want as far as an electrolyte source when you're exercising in the heat. And if you are consuming real food, while you're training in some of those endurance exercises, you're going to get some sodium chloride in there that will kind of do enough for you. So I don't really recommend consuming salt tablets because oftentimes sodium chloride, when it starts building up in your stomach, it can cause stomach issues, and that chloride molecule doesn't absorb as high as a potassium chloride, which is what we have in Nuun Performance. So from a chloride standpoint on electrolytes, you want a potassium chloride. So I don't necessarily recommend consuming a straight sodium chloride, salt tablet. There are some out there that have some lactates in there that some studies have shown can help. Just be wary of those. Don't take more than like maybe 1 or 2 during the course of the training sessions. Your electrolytes should come from your fluids. They have to be present in your fluids to absorb the water and to be used by your body properly.
And how do you feel about doubling up on the concentration of Nuun?
So I wouldn't double it up because that would take you to about 700 milligrams of sodium, which is pretty high. You can go 1.5 tablets or 1.5 scoops of Nuun Performance to get your electrolyte counts a little bit up. And with Performance, we'll increase that carb count a little bit because you'll just need a few more grams of carbohydrates to make sure that it'll deliver the fluid properly. So you can kind of increase your electrolyte content, but just be wary that, we want your sodium intake via your fluid. You want a minimum of 300 milligrams, and you want a maximum around 550 milligrams of sodium in there. And then, so that'll be around the range that you'll get from one tablet or 1 scoop to 1.5 of each of those.
Sweet. And so you pair that with the sweat test, and then you can figure out, for example, what your sodium per hour might be.
Yeah. You could get like a rough range of it. Yep.
Awesome. Sweet. And our last 2 questions from Meg and Carolina have to do with recovery, like post-run. The first one regards how much does drinking a cold beer dehydrate me?
I mean, if it's like there's a lot of water in it. I mean, alcohol will dehydrate you for, to a certain extent. But, just drink Nuun, with it, or make I always tell people, I know it's so tempting to drink like a cold beer right after a race or a long run, but just try to take care of your hydration first via Nuun or whatever kind of recovery drink that you're going to take, and then have the beer. It's just going to help your body recover a little bit more efficiently.
Sweet. And then regarding to long workouts, recovering and rehydrating after, how do you recommend doing that? Yeah,
so for longer workouts, for recovery, the key for rehydrating is to do it slowly. So it's not, it's not about consuming, like a liter of fluids within the first couple hours. It's about, really kind of using that same, around 16 ounces per hour. You want your body to slowly get back to that euhydrated state where it can start functioning like it's supposed to, rather than, shocking your system. And then ultimately at that time, it can kind of decrease the absorption of those fluids and electrolytes as well.
Sweet. So that concludes everything. If you have additional questions, please share them with me or on whatever social network, and we'll be able to get them answered. You can always email ambassadors@nuunlife.com with questions. I'll send them right over to Vishal. We'll get answers to you right away. Thank you so much, Vishal. Any last tips or tricks? Like one last thing, which we mentioned again, is the acclimation part. Let your body get used to the heat, and then keep your body cool. Eat a lot of fruit and vegetables. It's always good for you. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you, guys.
Take care.